Mr. President, Monday I spoke at the annual meeting of the Missouri Farm Bureau, and in our state, as in frankly almost every other state, the number one economic activity in terms of value produced is in agriculture. Frankly, where we live in the middle of the country, we do better in an economy that focuses on growing things and making things than we do on an economy that focuses more on giving advice. Not that we don't want to give a lot of advice, but the truth is we don't want to get a lot of advice either. So nothing wrong with a service-based economy and nothing wrong with an important service sector in your economy. But America in so many ways was built on a productive economy, on an economy that produced something and something tangible. I think we have a chance to see those things happen again. Where we're located, almost exactly in the middle of the country, the Mississippi River Valley is the biggest piece of contiguous agricultural land in the world. Compared to the near competitors in size, it's the only one of them that has its own built-in natural transportation center. In fact, Mr. President, there's more miles of navigable river in the Mississippi River Valley than in the rest of the world put together. Now, I didn't say more river than the rest of the world put together because that wouldn't be true, but more miles of river that you can actually navigate, river you can use as an avenue of transportation and commerce than everywhere else in the world put together. For an economy that's trying to reach out to the world or trying to efficiently compete, that's a big advantage. So at the Farm Bureau meeting, at least three of the things that the people I talked to that were most interested in were regulation and transportation and trade. When it comes to regulation, Missouri farm families understand that really many of the best things that have happened to them in the past 3 years have been the things that didn't happen. There was a terrible regulation proposed, Waters of the U.S., to where the EPA was trying to decide that their authority over navigable water would be the authority over all the water. That navigable water suddenly had become, under the Obama EPA, any water that could run into any water, that could run into any water, that could run into any water, that eventually would run into navigable water. If that's how we want to define it, the Congress should decide that, not the EPA. I stood on this floor many times during that terrifying time when the EPA was about to take over anything that related to water, from the new sidewalk in front of your house to whether you paved your driveway to whether you could set a utility pole without EPA approval. And with that Farm Bureau map of Missouri, I think 99.7% of our state would have met the new EPA definition of the water that the EPA would regulate. The other 0.3%, I think, were sinkholes that went directly back into the middle of the earth. So virtually 100% of all Missourians would have been affected by that. It would have slowed the economy in an incredible way because the EPA could have never exercised effectively the jurisdiction they were asking for. Well, the good news is it didn't happen. The good news is it didn't happen. The Trump administration moved forward with a Clean Water Act that made more sense. They listened to rural America. They listened to people who build houses. They listened to people who provide power. They listened to people who provide jobs. And they said, we're not going to go in that direction. And then there was the Obama Clean Power Plan. Sounds like a good thing, clean power. I'm not opposed to that. Don't know anybody that is. We want power to be as clean as you can reasonably expect it to be. But the Obama Clean Power Plan was so aggressive in its approach that where I live, the average utility bill at home and at work would have doubled in about 10 years. Well, lots of things work at today's utility rate or some gradual increase of today's utility rate that just frankly wouldn't work if the utility bill doubled. And that didn't happen either. In fact, we reversed course, and there's now an affordable clean energy rule, making it into law, into regulation, that really understands that again, if you at home write your utility check and then write it out of your checkbook again, a lot of the things that you do at your house you wouldn't be able to do if you had to pay your utility bill twice. And frankly, the job you have might not be there if you had to pay the utility bill twice. And also, when you're thinking about making something in America today, Mr. President, and I think there's a lot of interest in bringing overseas manufacturing or manufacturing that's gone overseas back to this country for lots of reasons. But when you're thinking about making something in America today, the first two questions you'd ask yourself would be, can you do what we want to do and pay the utility bill? And the second question would be, does the transportation system work for what we want to do? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, there's no reason to ask a third question. There's no reason to talk about workforce. There's no reason to talk about tax structure in the place you're thinking about locating. There's no reason to ask any other question if you can't do what you want to do, pay the utility bill, and still have some profit. No reason to talk about it if you can't do what you want to do and have a transportation system that allows you for what you want to do. And so those things are critically important, and they were critically important at the Farm Bureau meeting. They certainly understood it takes good highways, it takes good state roads, it takes a strong understanding of connecting highway and road and railroad and water together that allows you to compete. The last continuing resolution on this issue that we passed just a few weeks ago actually funded the 5th year of the highway bill that was passed 4 years ago. 5 years of authority, only 4 years of money, and that's $7.6 billion allows the transportation systems in our states and many things in our communities to happen. It allows county bridges to be built. Missouri, we were going to lose $350 million in federal highway funds if we hadn't figured out how to fund that 5th year, which we did figure out just a few days ago. And knowing that that's going to happen allows people to begin to look for other things. On trade, on Monday, I was predicting that we would get to USMCA before the end of the year. I was pleased on Tuesday when it was announced we had an agreement between the House and the administration. The votes have been there for a long time to pass this, but the House has to pass it first. And so, important to understand, elections have consequences. Speaker Pelosi got to decide and got to do some final negotiation. But trade's important. You know, trade policy, tax policy, regulatory policy are the three federal policies that make a difference in how competitive we are and how strong our economy is. And certainly when you have our number 1 and 2 trading partners, Mexico, our number 1 trading partner, Canada, our number 2 trading partner, are involved. Clearly, when they're the only 2 countries that we share a border with in the continental United States, Mexico and Canada, for the neighborhood to do well, it's important. What's happened in Mexico since NAFTA, incredible. What's happened in the United States in a positive way, also incredible. So hopefully we'll see the continuation of that commitment to have a vote in the House this year and a vote in the Senate as soon as we meet the deadlines that the law requires us, the waiting periods once we get a bill from the Senate. A lot of people are going to be relieved to know that there's more certainty about that.